In the early hours of September 7, 1940, London woke to an ominous hum high above the rooftops. The sound, almost melodic yet menacing, signaled the approach of enemy aircraft. Smoke and distant flashes illuminated the clouds as if the sky itself were on fire. Families stirred from uneasy sleep, clutching children close, unsure whether the world outside their windows would still exist by dawn. The streets, usually bustling with morning activity, felt hollow and fragile, echoing with a tension that gripped the entire city. Windows shivered from the vibrations above, and even the bravest souls hesitated, listening to the rhythmic approach of bombs yet to fall. This was the beginning of the Blitz, a terror that would consume London night after night, shaping its people, its streets, and its history. The first raids focused on docks, factories, and industrial areas, the lifeblood of Britain's war effort. Flames erupted along the Thames, casting a flickering orange glow on the blackened waters. Firefighters moved through the chaos, faces smeared with soot, hoses straining against fires that leapt from warehouse to warehouse. Each explosion shook the foundations of nearby homes, shattering glass and igniting fear. The roar of the Luftwaffe above became a grim symphony. The whine of engines, the buzz of propellers, and then the sudden, terrifying crash of bombs on Earth. Streets that had known laughter and commerce now echoed with sirens, shouted orders, and the muffled cries of those rushing to safety. Families scrambled to air raid shelters, sometimes mere basements hastily reinforced with sandbags. Mothers whispered comforting words to children whose eyes widened in terror, voices quivering despite attempts at calm. Fathers tried to maintain a sense of control, holding hands and guiding loved ones down narrow stairways. Outside, the night sky was alive with streaks of fire, tracer-rounds from anti-aircraft guns painting jagged lines across the darkness. Each distant explosion sent tremors through buildings, rattling walls and hearts alike. In those first weeks, Londoners learned the fragile rhythm of survival. Duck, cover, wait, breathe, repeat, always wondering what the next night would bring. Children experienced the Blitz as both nightmare and strange adventure. 7-year-old Tommy would press his face against the grimy window of his shelter, watching the sky ignite with orange and red flashes, imagining dragons or monsters descending from the heavens. His older sister Mary held him close, murmuring that it was only men in planes, and that everything would be okay, though she herself trembled with fear. The city became a surreal landscape of shadows and light, a place where playgrounds were deserted, schools stood empty or turned into shelters, and the ordinary was forever eclipsed by the extraordinary. Even in terror, curiosity sparked children tried to understand what it meant for a building to vanish in fire or a street to disappear under rubble. Underground stations transformed into temporary homes for thousands. Families sprawled on wooden benches or wrapped in threadbare blankets along tiled platforms. The echoes of distant bombs were muffled, yet the vibrations were constant reminders of the destruction above. Mothers sang lullabies, fathers whispered stories, children clutched toys for comfort amidst the murmur of anxious voices. Every station had its own ecosystem of survival: makeshift kitchens, small infirmaries, and areas designated for quiet reflection. Londoners adapted to this strange subterranean life, trading privacy for protection, sleep for vigilance, and fear for the fragile comfort of community. Neighborhoods in the East End bore the brunt of the early attacks. The Harding family watched helplessly as their home collapsed under a direct hit. Dust and debris clouded the street, mixing with the acrid smell of burning timber and chemical smoke. Neighbors appeared from adjacent buildings, carrying children, salvaging possessions, and supporting the injured. Amid the chaos, acts of extraordinary courage and kindness emerged. Strangers handed over coats to shivering families, offered water to the parched, and whispered reassurances even when none existed. The physical destruction was immense, but the spirit of Londoners, tenacious, unyielding, and profoundly human, became more visible than ever. Schools rapidly adapted to the new reality of war. Classrooms served as classrooms, hospitals, and shelters simultaneously. Teachers whispered calming words to students whose small hands gripped theirs tightly, eyes wide with fear. The occasional distant explosion punctuated lessons, but instruction continued regardless, a symbol of resilience against the chaos outside. Anti-aircraft guns painted arcs of light in the sky, often visible through partially blacked out windows. Children learned early the choreography of survival, where to hide, how to stay calm, and how to help one another, laying the foundations of courage that would follow them throughout the Blitz. Hospitals overflowed with the wounded and the traumatized. Nurses moved tirelessly, carrying stretchers through smoke-laden corridors, their faces pale under the flickering emergency lights. Patients, men and women of all ages, bore injuries, both visible and invisible. The medical teams worked with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine, yet each human story reminded them why the city fought to survive. In makeshift wards, the sound of shattering glass and distant explosions became a constant backdrop, and each day represented a delicate balance between life and death. London's skyline was transformed almost overnight. Iconic church spires, factory chimneys, and terraced houses were reduced to skeletal frames of brick and steel. Firefighters, soldiers, and ordinary citizens navigated streets littered with rubble, yet life persisted in pockets of normalcy. Markets reopened with minimal supplies, bakeries offered bread to those in need, and pubs became meeting points for whispered news and camaraderie. Each day survived was both a victory and a reminder of the fragility of existence amidst the relentless bombardment. Daily routines evolved to meet wartime demands. Gas masks hung by doorways, blackout curtains blocked every glimmer of light, and every citizen memorized the locations of nearby shelters. Despite the pervasive fear, an eerie calm settled over the city, a rhythm dictated by sirens, explosions, and fleeting moments of silence. Londoners walked the line between terror and resilience, understanding that life's continuity required adaptation, vigilance, and a stubborn refusal to surrender to despair. Amid the darkness and destruction, acts of kindness and humanity became London's quiet rebellion. Strangers shared blankets in crowded shelters, handed over scarce food, and comforted those who had lost everything. In one narrow alley of Bethnal Green, neighbors formed a chain to salvage what remained of a collapsed home, lifting debris and protecting children. Mothers whispered stories to frightened toddlers while men scouted dangerous streets for safety. These small, intimate acts of courage, often unnoticed by history, became the invisible scaffolding holding the city together, proving that even amid the horrors of war, human connection endured stronger than any blast. Soldiers stationed in London witnessed this resilience firsthand. They walked along shattered streets where buildings had become unrecognizable piles of brick, offering guidance and aid to citizens too stunned to move. Fathers who had once worried about bombs now helped carry neighbors' belongings, soldiers assisting in ways both practical and symbolic. The war was no longer distant, fought on foreign soil. It had arrived at home. Every shattered window and scorched wall became a lesson in endurance, a challenge to the city's identity, and a testament to the courage found in ordinary people, performing extraordinary acts simply to survive. Wealth and social status offered no immunity from the Blitz. Even prestigious neighborhoods and government offices felt the tremors of bombs falling nearby. Palatial buildings and stately homes bore scorched roofs, shattered windows, and damaged foundations. Inside, officials, servants, and families experienced the same anxiety as those in working-class districts. Fear was universal, and in the shared shadow of destruction, all Londoners, rich and poor, became united by the same nightly threat. The city itself became a great equalizer, a landscape where resilience transcended wealth and history. Radio broadcasts became lifelines for information and morale. In small living rooms and underground shelters, families huddled to listen to updates from the BBC, clinging to stories of heroism, military progress, and strategies meant to inspire hope. The crackle of static mixed with voices conveying reassurance, creating a fragile sense of stability. Parents used the broadcasts to explain the chaos to children, narrating a story larger than their own lives, while trying to soothe immediate fears. The city, though fragmented by fire and rubble, found cohesion in the shared ritual of listening, connecting every citizen to the ongoing struggle. Children's play transformed under wartime constraints. Games moved into basements, alleys, and rubble-strewn courtyards, where laughter bright and defiant, code off the walls. Hopscotch and marbles became acts of rebellion against the surrounding fear, and children invented intricate stories that merged reality and imagination. giving shape to the surreal world around them. Their resilience was silent yet profound. In the midst of bombings, air raids, and curfews, these small moments of joy were radical acts of life, proving that even the youngest Londoners were unwilling to let terror completely define their days. Artists and photographers documented the Blitz with stark honesty. Black and white images captured smoke-filled streets, ruined homes, and faces streaked with soot and exhaustion. One photograph from Bermondsey shows a group of children peering from a basement doorway, their eyes wide yet filled with determination as flames reflect off distant buildings. These visual records became more than news. They were chronicles of survival, memorializing courage, despair, and the surreal beauty of a city under siege. They offered Londoners a mirror of themselves, a reminder that while the physical landscape might be reduced to rubble, the human spirit remained unbroken. Music, too, persisted as an anchor of normalcy. Underground shelters resonated with piano melodies, soft lullabies, and impromptu singing sessions, the sound rising above the constant thrum of bombs and the whine of engines. Soldiers joined in, their voices adding depth to the communal experience, while children listened, mesmerized, clinging to notes as lifelines. In these small symphonies of survival, Londoners preserved fragments of everyday life, asserting that art, beauty, and culture could withstand even the most relentless destruction. Music became both refuge and rebellion, a declaration that London's identity would survive the Blitz intact. Air raid wardens patrolled the streets relentlessly. Lanterns swung through smoky alleys, guiding terrified citizens away from dangerous zones, signaling safety amidst chaos. They became the silhouettes of hope, moving steadily through destruction, occasionally shouting instructions over the roar of falling bombs. In one Southwark street, a warden carried a child to safety while parents followed, their faces etched with fear and gratitude. The warden's presence was both literal and symbolic, a reminder that courage often manifests in ordinary forms, lighting the path through nights filled with fire, smoke, and uncertainty. London's pubs transformed into quiet bastions of morale. Patrons exchanged whispered updates, shared limited rations, and offered solace in small comforts. The clink of glasses, once casual, now marked tiny victories. A safe journey home, a friend spared, or news of a successful counterattack. These places of leisure became sites of resilience, where citizens reaffirmed social bonds and preserved fragments of pre-war life amidst the ongoing chaos. Each smile, each gesture of solidarity reinforced the city's unspoken narrative. London might be burning, but it would endure, together and defiant. As the first harrowing months of bombing wore on, Londoners realized that survival extended beyond mere physical endurance. It demanded the preservation of identity, community, and hope against a backdrop of relentless fear. Every shattered street and smoldering building carried a story, a lesson in resilience, and an unspoken testament to courage. And yet, even as the city learned to breathe under nightly terror, a darker, more intense phase of the Blitz loomed on the horizon, one that would test these lessons of survival to their very limits. The stories beneath the rubble were only beginning to unfold. In the crowded streets of Bermondsey, daily life became a delicate dance between survival and routine. Markets reopened with limited supplies, their stalls bearing charred remnants of the previous night's destruction. Shopkeepers greeted customers with forced smiles, dust clinging to clothes and hair. Mothers balanced shopping baskets while holding children tightly, scanning rooftops for any sign of enemy planes. Men repaired broken windows with scavenged wood, hammering with urgency as if every nail could stave off fear itself. Even in the smallest gestures, passing a loaf of bread, sharing a candle, residents demonstrated courage, proving that life could persist in the shadow of relentless chaos. Children adapted quickly, transforming the ruins into a playground of imagination. Amidst splintered bricks and twisted metal, they played games that mimicked the war above them, piloting imaginary planes, building fortresses from rubble, and racing through alleyways untouched by adults. Their laughter, defiant and piercing, cut through the fear that hung in the air. Teachers and parents watched cautiously, torn between protecting them and encouraging resilience. In this strange mix of play and danger, children discovered agency, learning to navigate a world where destruction and creativity coexisted, often within a single street corner. In shelters and basements, small communities formed, families huddled together, sharing blankets and whispers in the dim glow of lanterns. Elderly residents told stories of past wars, their voices steady but tinged with sorrow, offering lessons on endurance. Young couples clutched each other in fear, while neighbors offered what little food they had, forming bonds that would last far beyond the Blitz. The underground life created a microcosm of society, a fragile but resilient ecosystem where survival depended on cooperation, compassion, and the quiet defiance of human connection against an unforgiving sky. The nights were the hardest. Sirens wailed like mournful cries, echoing off brick walls and down narrow alleys. Families gathered in kitchens or reinforced closets, listening as bombs pounded streets above them. The rhythm of explosions became a grim lullaby, punctuated by the occasional distant cheer from anti-aircraft gun crews or the low rumble of engines disappearing into the distance. Children pressed themselves against parents' sides, imagining worlds where the noise never stopped. Yet, amidst the fear, moments of bravery and solidarity shone neighbors comforting strangers, men guiding the elderly, children clutching one another for warmth and reassurance. Firefighters faced the brunt of the destruction. Flames consumed homes, factories, and schools alike, each inferno more perilous than the last. They moved through smoke and falling debris, hoses straining against fires that threatened to leap from street to street. Citizens watched in awe, offering tea and sandwiches to exhausted crews, their gratitude mingled with anxiety. In the chaos of these nights, a simple act, extinguishing a fire, saving a child, rescuing a trapped animal, became a heroic testament to human courage. The city depended on these quiet heroes who worked tirelessly as both shield and symbol of London's resilience. The Blitz altered social hierarchies in unexpected ways. Factory workers and laborers, once overlooked, became vital to survival. Their skills in construction, repair, and logistics suddenly in high demand. Teachers, shopkeepers, and even teenagers found themselves performing roles critical to community endurance. This redistribution of responsibility blurred the lines between social classes, creating a shared sense of purpose. Everyone, from child to elder, contributed to the intricate machinery of daily survival, proving that heroism was not defined by rank, but by willingness to act when necessity demanded it. In quieter moments between raids, families sought fleeting normalcy. Tea boiled on small stoves, candlelight flickered over worn furniture, and the soft hum of conversation filled rooms temporarily free of fear. Parents read to children from tattered storybooks, teaching letters and arithmetic, while outside, rooftops glimmered with the reflection of distant fires. These moments were fragile, transient, yet essential. Tiny acts of life asserting themselves against the backdrop of destruction, preserving routines that connected citizens to the world they had known before war arrived. London's postal workers braved dangerous streets to maintain communication. Letters carried reassurance, news of survival, or brief glimpses of hope. In one case, a young boy named Peter received daily letters from his father at the front, the paper crinkled and ink smudged by the damp. Each note was treasured, read aloud by the family, forming a lifeline across distance and danger. The mundane act of delivering mail became heroic, knitting together the fragmented lives of Londoners and reminding them that even in chaos, human connection endured. The Blitz reshaped the city's architecture. Roofs vanished, walls crumbled, and historic buildings were reduced to rubble, their outlines barely recognizable against the night sky. In their place, survivors improvised. Tarps, overexposed homes, makeshift shelters in alleyways, and barricades against falling debris. Streets became a patchwork of the old and new, destruction and adaptation interwoven. Each reconstruction, however temporary, symbolized defiance. Londoners refused to allow devastation to erase the city's life, spirit, or memory. Children's education faced radical transformation. Schools operated irregularly, often in basements, with alternating lessons for safety. Teachers improvised, using salvaged chalkboards and limited supplies to continue instruction. Lessons included basic literacy, arithmetic, and drills for air raids education and survival intertwined. Students learned resilience in tandem with academics, their growth shaped not only by books, but by the extraordinary circumstances surrounding them. The classroom became both a sanctuary and a training ground for the realities of wartime life. Despite adversity, entertainment persisted. Small theaters, underground cinemas, and music halls adapted to blackout conditions, offering glimpses of joy and escapism. Citizens lined up to hear bands play patriotic songs, watch comedies, or listen to traveling performers who risked their lives to maintain morale. These moments, though fleeting, reminded Londoners that beauty and humor could endure, even amidst smoke, fire, and rubble. The human desire for storytelling, music, and laughter proved unstoppable, a counterpoint to the violence raining from above. Medical services faced unprecedented strain. Hospitals overflowed, field medics worked in improvised wards, and civilians trained in first aid joined the effort. Every explosion brought new injuries, each one a challenge to limited resources. Nurses and doctors operated tirelessly, their faces etched with exhaustion and resolve. Small victories: a child saved, a mother stabilized, a man treated for Burnsby, came symbols of triumph against the relentless tide of destruction. The city's capacity to endure depended not only on bricks and mortar, but on these tireless human lifelines. Stories of individual heroism emerged daily. One account tells of a young girl, an who led a group of younger children through smoke-filled streets to safety after a nearby building collapse. Her courage, instinctive and untrained, became a legend within her neighborhood. Such acts, repeated countless times across London, created a tapestry of resilience, highlighting that bravery was not limited to soldiers or officials, but lived in every citizen, regardless of age or status. The Luftwaffe's attacks were relentless and unpredictable. No district from East End to West End remained untouched. Families learned to read the sky for patterns, anticipating the approach of bombers by the faint hum of engines or the glint of metal against the clouds. Streets became survival arenas, each step carefully calculated to avoid falling debris. Citizens adapted to a life where danger was constant, developing instincts and routines that balanced fear with necessary action, and teaching children lessons that would stay with them long after the war ended. Religion and faith offered solace to many. Churches, some partially destroyed, became havens for prayer, reflection, and quiet community gatherings. Clergy walked through damaged streets, comforting families, offering blessings, and organizing aid. The symbolic endurance of sacred spaces, even when their physical structures were compromised, reinforced a collective sense of hope. Faith became both emotional sustenance and a rallying point, reminding Londoners that even in the face of human-made destruction, a higher purpose and shared belief could provide strength. Kitchens became arenas of ingenuity. Food shortages meant households improvised with what little remained. Scavenged vegetables, rationed meat, and creative recipes that transformed scarcity into sustenance. Neighbors swapped ingredients, shared meals, and taught each other methods to stretch supplies. Cooking, once mundane, became a form of survival artistry, a tangible expression of resilience and community amid constant threat. Every meal prepared and shared was a quiet act of defiance against the chaos consuming the city. Nighttime raids introduced an unpredictable rhythm of terror. Sirens, wailing like specters of doom, interrupted sleep and ordinary conversation. Citizens trained themselves to respond instinctively, moving from beds to shelters, checking on family members, and clinging to routines designed to preserve life. In these moments, fear became a constant companion, yet it was tempered by experience and shared vigilance. Londoners adapted to a life where the next explosion could come at any moment, finding courage in preparation and strength in unity. Stories of survival were intertwined with loss. Entire streets vanished under bombings, families displaced, and cherished landmarks destroyed. Yet, these tragedies were met with resilience. Neighbors rebuilt homes together, communities shared resources, and children found ways to continue playing, learning, and imagining despite the shadows overhead. Each act of recovery became a statement of life's persistence, a refusal to allow destruction to dominate the human spirit. Communication networks strained but persevered. Telegraphs, radios, and messengers kept the city informed, delivering news, warnings, and encouragement. Citizens relied on these lifelines to plan, adapt, and endure. In one instance, a small neighborhood successfully coordinated evacuation and aid efforts solely through word of mouth, and a series of runners delivering notes, a testament to ingenuity and collective responsibility under extreme pressure. As Londoners marked their 6th month under nightly bombardment, exhaustion settled into their bones, but resolve remained unbroken. The city's streets were scarred, its buildings fractured, and its people weary beyond measure. Yet in every repaired home, lit shelter, and shared meal, there was proof that life could persist. Still, the Blitz had not reached its most harrowing phase. The Luftwaffe strategy was evolving, promising nights that would test courage, endurance, and humanity like never before. And so, beneath the smoke and shadows, the next chapter of London's struggle was poised to unfold. 7-year-old Lucy lived in a narrow row of terraced houses in Hackney, her bedroom window facing a street scarred by earlier raids. At night, she would lie awake, counting the flashes in the sky and imagining shapes in the fiery trails above. Her mother, Emily, tried to reassure her, stroking her hair and whispering that they were safe in the shelter below. Yet Lucy's fear was intertwined with curiosity. The destruction fascinated her almost as much as it terrified. The war had turned her childhood into a strange mix of nightmares and adventures, a landscape of shadows and whispered stories that no bedtime tale could ever fully capture. Children like Lucy often assumed responsibilities far beyond their years. She learned to navigate the streets with caution, deliver messages between neighbors, and assist younger children to underground stations when sirens wailed. These acts, though small in scale, carried immense weight, giving young Londoners a sense of agency in a world where chaos seemed to dominate. Their courage was instinctive, shaped by necessity, or in profoundly humane a testament to how war accelerated the growth of innocence into resilience. Schools became shelters, playgrounds, and classrooms simultaneously. Teachers adapted lessons to include survival skills, reading the sky for enemy aircraft, practicing air raid drills, and understanding the rhythms of explosions. In one Southwark basement, children sat cross-legged on dusty floors, reciting multiplication tables while the distant whine of engines reminded them that learning and danger were inseparable. Education became a tool of endurance, instilling knowledge alongside courage, preparing young minds for a life where survival required intellect as much as bravery. In one Docklands neighborhood, a community of mothers formed an informal network. They rotated nights in shelters, shared rationed meals, and organized relief for families whose homes were destroyed. Their coordination was seamless, yet invisible to outsiders, a testament to the quiet power of women in wartime London. Through whispered plans and hurried gestures, they wove an invisible safety net, ensuring that children slept in warmth, meals were distributed fairly, and those injured or traumatized received immediate attention. Their labor, both emotional and practical, became the backbone of civilian resilience. Soldiers and government officials observed these civilian efforts with a mix of awe and necessity. One account tells of an officer who, walking through bombed-out streets, was struck by the efficiency of women running makeshift kitchens, the courage of teenagers assisting in debris clearance, and the ingenuity of neighbors reinforcing damaged buildings. The distinction between front lines and home front blurred, as every citizen became a critical player in London's survival strategy, demonstrating that ordinary lives could harbor extraordinary heroism. Children found fleeting moments of escapism in music, books, and games. In a shelter in Clapham, a group of boys performed an impromptu play using scraps of fabric and cardboard, acting out tales of knights and dragons amid the muffled thuds of bombs above. Their performance, watched by anxious parents and older siblings, brought laughter and relief, momentarily pushing fear to the periphery. These acts of imagination, small but potent, were survival tools in themselves, reminders that the human spirit could find creativity even in the midst of destruction. The city's landmarks were not spared. St. Paul's Cathedral, battered yet standing, became a symbol of endurance. Fire watchers stationed on its rooftops braved sparks and smoke to alert residents of imminent danger. Children gazed upward, inspired by the defiance of stone and spire, amidst a sky consumed by fire. Landmarks offered psychological refuge. Their survival amidst destruction reassured Londoners that not everything familiar could be destroyed. They were beacons, both literal and symbolic, guiding hope through the night. London's firefighters, known as Blitzmen, continued their tireless work, often risking life and limb. During one raid in Bermondsey, a team rescued a trapped family from a burning terrace, carrying children through smoke and flames, while shouts of urgency echoed around them. Every act, no matter how small, became a story retold in hushed tones across neighborhoods, fueling collective morale. Their courage reminded citizens that, even against overwhelming odds, human determination could protect and preserve life. Air raid wardens and volunteer helpers became central figures in the city's nightly survival. Lanterns illuminated smoky streets, guiding families to safety, while wardens shouted instructions above the roar of engines. In one account, a warden carried an elderly woman on his back through falling debris, ignoring the danger to himself. These individuals, often unrecognized beyond local communities, embodied London's defiance, quiet yet unwavering refusal to yield to fear. Among the chaos, stories of loss were interwoven with tales of courage. Entire families vanished under bombing raids, yet neighbors banded together to rebuild homes, share food, and comfort the bereaved. Every act of resilience reinforced a collective narrative that Londoners would endure not just as individuals, but as a unified community. The city's spirit became a living testament to human tenacity. Each rebuilt home and shared meal, a silent rebellion against destruction. The Blitz also revealed the psychological toll of war on children. Nightmares became commonplace. Some awoke screaming, others became unusually quiet, staring at shattered streets outside their windows. Psychologists and teachers noticed changes in behavior. Playground interactions grew tense, and laughter often carried a nervous edge. Yet these same children displayed remarkable resilience, forming protective bonds with peers, imitating adult courage, and maintaining routines that created a semblance of normality in an abnormal world. Family bonds were tested and strengthened simultaneously. Parents balanced fear with the need to maintain authority and provide reassurance. In many cases, children became emotional anchors for their parents, offering comfort and courage in return. Stories abound of siblings holding one another through bombing nights, of children helping mothers cook rationed meals, or assisting fathers in rebuilding damaged homes. The war inverted traditional roles in small but profound ways, creating networks of mutual reliance that fortified the family unit against the external chaos. Volunteers in bombed-out neighborhoods demonstrated extraordinary initiative. Young men and women cleared debris, salvaged furniture, and repaired damaged buildings, often improvising tools and methods in the absence of official support. These efforts, though often unnoticed by authorities, kept communities functioning. By the end of 1940, entire streets had been partially reconstructed by residents themselves, a testament to the ingenuity and determination of ordinary citizens under extraordinary pressure. Psychological resilience was mirrored in simple acts of normality. Tea boiled on small stoves, candles flickered on tables, and small gardens persisted amidst rubble. Citizens cultivated plants in makeshift pots, children carried water for street flowers, neighborhoods organized small festivals when possible. These acts were more than distractions. They were deliberate assertions of life, beauty, and continuity amidst destruction, reinforcing morale in ways that formal support systems often could not. Communication and information were lifelines. Citizens relied on radios, messengers, and word-of-mouth updates to anticipate raids and coordinate aid. In one district, a network of volunteers used a series of runners and signals to ensure that families in vulnerable homes could reach shelters quickly. These informal systems often outperformed official mechanisms, demonstrating the adaptive intelligence of communities under stress and the importance of localized knowledge in urban survival during wartime. Children began to internalize the rhythms of the Blitz. They learned to recognize the telltale hum of approaching aircraft, the intervals between distant explosions, and the sequence of sirens signaling danger. Many developed acute spatial awareness, navigating streets littered with debris or guiding others safely to shelters. These skills, acquired out of necessity, reflected the extraordinary capacity of young minds to adapt, learn, and protect, even in the most perilous circumstances. London's cultural life endured despite the destruction. Local artists, writers, and musicians documented daily life, producing works that reflected both trauma and resilience. Sketches of bombed streets, poems of courage, and songs celebrating small victories provided both catharsis and morale support. They reminded citizens and future generations that even amidst relentless bombing, human creativity could persist, transforming fear into expression, loss into memory, and chaos into art. The Blitz also fostered stories of intergenerational courage. Elderly citizens who had endured earlier wars took active roles in assisting younger generations. Some taught children first aid, others guided them safely through damaged streets, and many shared stories that imbued lessons in bravery, endurance, and hope. These interactions connected past and present, ensuring that resilience was passed down not only through instruction but through lived example. Religious institutions continued to anchor communities. Clergy organized aid, offered counseling, and maintained rituals despite partial destruction of buildings. Churches became gathering points for practical assistance and emotional support, reinforcing a sense of continuity and shared purpose. For many Londoners, faith intertwined with daily survival, offering both comfort and a framework for interpreting the chaos enveloping their city. As London entered its second winter, under relentless bombing, exhaustion weighed heavily on its citizens. Families, children, and volunteers alike were weary beyond measure, yet their resolve remained steadfast. Streets bore scars, homes were fragile shells, and yet life persisted. But a new, more intense phase of the Blitz was approaching, one that would test endurance, courage, and the limits of human spirit like never before. The city braced itself for nights darker than any before, as the true depth of the Luftwaffe campaign loomed ominously. Prime Minister Winston Churchill became the living symbol of defiance during the Blitz. His speeches, broadcast over the radio, infused courage into weary citizens. "We shall never surrender," he declared, words that echoed across shelters, pubs, and ruined homes. Londoners clung to his gravelly voice as though it were a shield, believing that their suffering was part of a larger fight for freedom. His nightly visits to bombed districts, often walking among the rubble with his cigar clenched between his teeth, gave the people a sense that their leader was enduring the same trials they faced. Churchill's leadership, however, was not without criticism. Some questioned whether the government had done enough to prepare civilians, pointing to shortages of shelters and inadequate early warning systems. Yet despite the criticism, his resolve and his willingness to be visibly present mattered deeply. He embodied London's determination not to bow, a figure who transformed personal charisma into collective morale. His presence turned ruins into stages for resilience, his words stitching together the city's fractured spirit night after night. Alongside Churchill, King George VI and Queen Elizabeth played vital symbolic roles. The royal family refused to leave London, choosing instead to remain at Buckingham Palace, even after it was bombed. When the palace chapel was struck, the Queen famously remarked, "I am glad we have been bombed, and we can look the East End in the face." This solidarity resonated profoundly with citizens who had lost homes and loved ones, reinforcing the idea that the monarchy, too, was enduring the same war, shoulder to shoulder with its people. The royal family's visits to devastated neighborhoods carried immense psychological power. Children curtsied amidst rubble, mothers held back tears, and fathers straightened their shoulders as the king and queen walked among them. These encounters did not rebuild homes or erase grief, but they provided something equally vital: recognition. Londoners felt seen, their suffering acknowledged, their resilience honored. In a city where every street bore scars of war, the monarchy's presence became an emotional balm, binding citizens more tightly to the national cause. Behind the scenes, local leaders and ordinary citizens also emerged as heroes. Borough wardens coordinated evacuations, while community organizers rallied neighbors to share food and rebuild damaged homes. Their names rarely entered history books, but their impact was immense. In one Bethnal Green neighborhood, a grocer named Arthur transformed his shop into a distribution hub, ensuring families received rations and medical aid. These unsung figures were the hidden backbone of London's survival, their efforts proving that leadership could emerge from any corner. Meanwhile, London's medical services were stretched beyond imagination. Nurses and doctors worked tirelessly through nights of bombing, treating burns, fractures, and shock in overcrowded hospitals. Makeshift operating theaters were set up in basements, lit by lanterns and staffed by exhausted professionals who refused to abandon their posts. Stories spread of nurses who shielded patients with their own bodies during raids, Embodying a form of heroism as vital as any soldier's, their work stitched life back together in a city relentlessly torn apart. Fire brigades became London's frontline defenders. Known as the Second Army, they rushed toward burning buildings while others sought shelter. Engines roared through smoke-choked streets, hoses spraying water onto flames that leapt from rooftops to sky. Firefighters often worked until collapse, battling not only blazes but exhaustion, hunger, and despair. Their courage turned them into legends, their silhouettes against firelit skies etched into the city's collective memory. London owed much of its survival to their relentless defiance of destruction. Women played increasingly vital roles. Men away fighting abroad, women filled factories, drove ambulances, and patrolled as air raid wardens. They balanced these responsibilities with caring for children, cooking on scarce rations, and tending to damaged homes. Their dual burdens forged a quiet strength, one that reshaped societal roles permanently. The war blurred traditional boundaries, proving that resilience was not the domain of one gender, but a shared human responsibility. In the crucible of the Blitz, women's labor and courage became indispensable pillars of survival. The psychological strain deepened with each passing month. Night after night of sleeplessness carved hollow lines into faces. Citizens developed what came to be known as Blitz fatigue, a dull exhaustion mixed with anxiety, leaving many detached from their surroundings. Some coped through humor, telling dark jokes in pubs or shelters. Others turned inward, silent and withdrawn. Yet even in the depths of fatigue, Londoners clung to rituals, cups of tea, small gatherings, whispered prayers that anchored them against the tide of despair. Stories of breakdown were balanced by stories of unexpected resilience. A seamstress named Margaret, whose home was destroyed in Stepney, continued to sew clothes for neighbors from salvaged fabric. A baker in Lambeth reopened his shop just days after being bombed, serving bread from a half-collapsed storefront. These acts were more than stubbornness. They were psychological lifelines, proof that life could continue in defiance of destruction. In each loaf of bread, each mended coat, London's spirit was quietly, persistently renewed. For many Londoners, humor became the sharpest weapon against fear. Cartoons mocked Hitler, jokes circulated about rationing, and posters urged citizens to keep calm and carry on in shelters. Laughter often erupted in the darkest moments. An air raid siren mistaken for a rooster, a blackout mishap that left neighbors stumbling over each other. Humor transformed terror into something survivable, shrinking the enormity of war into manageable fragments. It was not denial, it was defiance. Laughter ringing out as a deliberate refusal to let fear win. Propaganda reinforced this spirit. Posters, films, and radio broadcasts urged unity and perseverance. The government framed the Blitz as not just survival, but a moral battle. Civilians as soldiers, endurance as victory. Messages of courage saturated public life, reminding Londoners that their sacrifice was part of a grander story. Yet propaganda alone could not sustain morale. Its power lay in echoing truths already visible in daily life. The courage of firefighters, the solidarity of neighbors, the resilience of children. Religious faith and ritual deepened during these months. Churches held candlelit services in basements, hymns rising above the distant thunder of bombs. Clergy offered comfort to the grieving, reminding congregations that their endurance carried spiritual significance. Faith did not erase fear, but it reframed it, allowing citizens to believe that survival had meaning beyond the immediate. In prayer, Londoners found not just solace, but a sense of collective destiny, binding their endurance to a higher purpose. War poets and writers emerged, capturing the surreal texture of life under bombardment. Their works describe skies stitched with fire, nights broken by sirens, and faces lit by courage and soot. These words immortalized experiences that photographs could not fully capture: the smell of smoke lingering in clothes, the tremor in hands after near misses, the aching silence after a raid ended. Literature became a form of resistance, preserving not just events but emotions, ensuring the Blitz would never be reduced to statistics alone. London's underground system continued to be both refuge and stage. By day, trains carried commuters through tunnels still scarred by debris. By night, those same tunnels became villages of survival, filled with beds, kitchens, and impromptu theaters. Families painted murals on walls, Musicians performed between platforms, and children played games across tracks, now silent with suspended trains. Life underground mirrored life above, scarred, fragile but defiantly alive. The tunnels became arteries of endurance, carrying not just trains, but the pulse of a city, determined to outlast the storm. The Blitz also reshaped the city's physical landscape. Vast areas of East London lay flattened, their streets unrecognizable. Maps became unreliable. Landmarks vanished overnight. Citizens navigated by memory, orienting themselves by chimneys, trees, or the silhouette of surviving buildings. The destruction turned London into a surreal labyrinth, where familiar paths ended in rubble, and once vibrant communities became ghostly expanses of ash. Yet even here, signs of persistence emerged. Makeshift stalls, children chalking games onto cracked pavements, neighbors gathering amid ruins. Evacuation remained a critical element of survival, particularly for children. Many were sent to the countryside, leaving parents behind in the shattered city. Letters carried fragments of their lives, descriptions of farms, schools, and newfound safety mingled with longing for home. Parents endured agonizing separations, torn between relief at their children's safety and grief at their absence. For those who stayed, the city became both battlefield and home, a place where love and loss intertwined with every passing day. The absence of children transformed neighborhoods. Streets once alive with laughter grew eerily quiet, their silence amplifying the destruction. Parents left behind leaned on each other, creating surrogate families to fill emotional gaps. At the same time, children in the countryside faced their own trials, adjusting to new guardians, unfamiliar routines, and the loneliness of separation. These parallel stories illustrated the breadth of the Blitz's impact. No family untouched, no community spared. As 1941 advanced, the Luftwaffe shifted tactics. The intensity of raids deepened, targeting ports, factories, and infrastructure as well as civilian homes. Citizens sensed that the worst was not behind them, but still to come. Each night carried the weight of uncertainty. Would their streets survive? Would loved ones return? Would morning light reveal more ruins than yesterday? London had endured much, but the storm ahead promised to test its resilience beyond anything yet experienced. And so, on the eve of what many feared would be the most devastating raids yet, London braced itself once more. Families descended into shelters, candles flickering, radios crackling with Churchill's familiar voice. Children clutched dolls, mothers whispered prayers. Fathers stared silently at the trembling ceilings above. The city waited, its breath held, its courage stretched thin but unbroken. What came next would not just shape London's survival, it would define its legacy for generations to come. 1941, after months of ceaseless bombings, London was a city reshaped not only physically but emotionally. Streets bore scars of fire and collapse, but so too did the minds of its people. Nightmares lingered long after the sirens ceased, and sudden noises could send hearts racing. Trauma was everywhere, children afraid of the dark, parents who flinched at the sound of planes, families who could never again sleep soundly. The Blitz had carved deep lines into London's collective psyche, scars that would last far beyond the war itself. Yet even as trauma spread, resilience became ingrained. Citizens adapted to living among ruins as though it were normal life. Its shops reopened beneath shattered roofs. Buses maneuvered through debris-strewn streets, and weddings took place amidst rubble. Londoners proved that existence itself was defiance. To continue daily life in a city perpetually under siege was not an act of denial. It was a deliberate assertion of identity, a refusal to let war erase who they were. Families carried these lessons for decades. Parents who had endured the Blitz often spoke little of their pain, but their children grew up sensing the weight of unspoken memories. For many, survival became a silent inheritance passed down through habits, stories, and a quiet toughness. The Blitz was not only a historical event, but a formative force in family narratives, shaping values of endurance, solidarity, and pragmatism that outlived the bombing itself. The reconstruction of London began even before the war ended. Citizens cleared rubble, planted gardens in bomb craters, and painted slogans of hope on surviving walls. Architects dreamed of rebuilding not just houses but entire neighborhoods with stronger, more modern designs. Each brick laid, each scaffold raised carried symbolic weight, proof that destruction could give way to renewal. Rebuilding was not merely physical. It was emotional, a process of reclaiming life from the ashes. Memorials also began to take shape. Plaques appeared on streets where shelters had collapsed, and churches preserved ruins as silent witnesses to devastation. Families kept photographs of bombed-out homes as reminders of both loss and resilience. These acts of remembrance ensured that the Blitz would not fade into abstract history, would remain personal, etched into the very fabric of the city's memory. The Blitz's legacy extended beyond London. Across Britain, citizens looked to the capital as a symbol of national endurance. The phrase "the Blitz spirit" entered common vocabulary, embodying resilience, humor, and solidarity in adversity. This spirit became a cultural touchstone, invoked not only during war, but in times of disaster and crisis for decades to come. London's suffering, transformed into myth and memory, became Britain's enduring emblem of defiance. Internationally, images of London ablaze captured the world's imagination. Newspapers in America showed photographs of St. Paul's Cathedral standing defiant amid smoke, inspiring solidarity across the Atlantic. The Blitz helped shift global opinion, reminding allies that Britain's struggle was humanity's struggle. London was no longer just a city. It was a stage where the drama of democracy's survival played out against tyranny's fire. For survivors, the end of the Blitz brought mixed emotions. Relief at surviving blended with grief for those lost, and exhaustion from months of fear. Some felt guilty for having lived while neighbors perished. Others carried a quiet pride at having endured. The silence that followed the raids was almost unsettling after. So many nights of terror, peace itself felt strange, fragile, something that could vanish with the next siren. Children who grew up during the Blitz carried its imprint into adulthood. Many described themselves as shaped by resilience, hardened by fear, yet softened by the memory of solidarity. They remembered shelters as both prisons and playgrounds, rubble as both nightmare and adventure. Their recollections captured the paradox of the Blitz. Horror intertwined with strange moments of beauty. Suffering paired with profound human connection. Writers and filmmakers immortalized these experiences, ensuring that future generations could glimpse the textures of life under siege. From diaries and memoirs to novels and documentaries, the Blitz became not only history but art, an enduring source of stories that continued to inspire. These works preserve not just facts but feelings, the smoke in the lungs, the trembling hands, the sound of laughter amid destruction. The rebuilt London carried reminders of its ordeal. Some churches remained skeletal, preserved as ruins. Others stood proudly restored, their scars hidden beneath fresh stone. New housing estates rose where entire neighborhoods had vanished, symbols of both loss and renewal. The city had been broken, but it had also been remade stronger in some ways, forever haunted in others. Survivors often spoke of how the Blitz redefined community. Before the raids, London was a collection of districts, each with its own identity. Afterward, it became one city, unified by shared ordeal. Strangers became family, neighbors became comrades, and survival became a collective act. This newfound solidarity endured, shaping civic life and leaving a legacy of cooperation that influenced post-war Britain. At the same time, the Blitz left deep social questions unresolved. Poverty had magnified suffering as working-class districts bore the brunt of destruction. Though the Blitz fostered solidarity, it also highlighted inequalities that demanded change. In many ways, the seeds of Britain's post-war reforms, housing programs, welfare expansion, and healthcare systems were planted in the rubble of Blitz streets. For historians, the Blitz became both symbol and puzzle. Was it truly as unifying as the myths claimed, or did memory smooth over the divisions and traumas that persisted? The truth was complex. Both unity and suffering, resilience and despair coexisted. But what remained undeniable was the courage of Londoners, ordinary people whose lives became extraordinary simply by enduring night after night of terror. Each generation since has looked back on the Blitz for inspiration. In moments of crisis, politicians and citizens alike invoke its spirit. The idea that courage, humor, and solidarity can overcome fear and destruction. The Blitz endures not only as history but as metaphor, a timeless reminder of what it means to face catastrophe together. Survivors in their later years often revisited the shelters where they had once huddled. Some brought grandchildren, telling stories of nights when the earth shook and the sky burned. They described fear, but also courage, loss, but also love for the younger generations. These stories turned ruins into lessons, transforming the Blitz from tragedy into inheritance. Museums and archives continue to preserve these voices. Letters, photographs, and artifacts from ration books to children's toys sit behind glass, silent yet eloquent. Visitors walk through reconstructed shelters, hear recordings of sirens, and imagine themselves in that vanished world. History is kept alive not just through words, but through the textures and objects that survivors left behind. Even today, London carries echoes of the Blitz. Beneath modern glass towers and bustling streets lie fragments of bomb sites, preserved as quiet memorials. The city's resilience has become part of its identity, woven into its very architecture and psyche. The Blitz is not just remembered, it is lived, present in the way Londoners respond to challenges, disasters, and change. The Blitz was more than a chapter in World War II. It was a crucible in which a city was tested, broken, and remade. Its people endured not only bombs but fear, loss, and exhaustion, and emerged with a spirit that inspired the world. The scars of those nights remain, but so too does the light, a reminder that even in humanity's darkest hours, courage and solidarity can prevail. And so, the story of the Blitz is not only about destruction, but about survival. It is the story of children who played in shelters, of mothers who held families together, of firefighters who ran into flames, of leaders who stood firm, and of neighbors who became lifelines. It is the story of a city that refused to break. London endured the Blitz, and in enduring, it left behind a legacy of resilience that continues to light the path for generations yet to come.